We are trying to accomplish a couple of things with the use of tactical empathy. First is to build and maintain relationships. This is the fastest way to build and maintain relationships. Um, there is a thought process out there. There are people that subscribe to the theory of common ground. Many people try to establish and maintain relationships with common ground. And I'm not here to tell you that common ground is not a, I'm not here to tell you that common ground is a bad approach. There are many who have established relationships and made deals based on common ground. However, you have to ask yourself, what are you going to do if that's you? What are you going to do if there's no common ground? What if you got no common ground with the people that you're dealing with on the other side? What do you do then? This is where tactical empathy comes in. I don't need common ground. I had no common ground with anybody I ever talked to inside a crisis site who had taken hostages or were threatening to commit suicide or otherwise failing to surrender. Never had any common ground, and yet was successful in influencing surrender in the majority of the cases that were out there. Why is that? It's because, common ground or not, tactical empathy is something that can be used in any interaction, business, personal, or otherwise. Common ground is usually specific to the situation. And so just be careful with your use of common ground. Number one, you're making an assumption if you use it. You're making an assumption that just because you have common ground with this other person, they're going to do what you need them to do. And for some people, that assumption is a dangerous one. As a cop, when I was on the road and I would see a vehicle violate a traffic law and I light the person up and I pull them to the side of the road, it used to drive me crazy when the first thing that comes out of the window before I even approach the car is a badge. Now a badge is hanging out of the window of this violating vehicle. He is all, or she has already made an assumption that just because we have common ground, i.e. we both carry badges, that I'm going to give them special dispensation. And usually it was the opposite. When you've already made an assumption about what I intend to do based on the fact that we have common ground, I found it offensive. I had one guy, I pulled him over. As I'm approaching the car, there's a badge hanging out the window. It's a federal badge. I can see that as I'm approaching the car. And the badge, it said Special Agent Housing and Urban Development. And I said, that ain't gonna cut it, bro. That ain't gonna cut it. And so just be careful with the common ground, because if it's not there, you're gonna be in trouble. And number two, people often take offense at you suggesting that, oh, your son plays baseball, my son plays baseball, we should make a deal. Don't assume that that's always going to be the case. The second reason is that it disarms. Proactively going after the negative emotions. And when we start our next session, that's when we're going to really dive deep into this concept of accusations audits. Most of the people on this call right now have a very good handle on what tactical empathy is. Accusations audits are, but we're going to go into it a little bit deeper during the next session. But it is when we proactively go after the negatives to mitigate them, putting together a list of negative labels from their perspective. You can actually diffuse those negatives. What are those negative opinions, assumptions, and impressions that the other side has about you? If they were standing on a street corner, hurling invectives about you and about the conversation at hand, what would you want to stand next to them and deny? This is what tactical empathy helps with. All right. 4 most emotional words in negotiation. And they're emotional because they're all subjective. It's all relative. It all depends. Leverage changes depending on what side of the table you're on. If I were to take Brooks, a family member of Brooke, if I were to take them hostage and I were to call Brooke and I said, if you ever want to see them again, you're going to pay me $10 million. If you ever want to see this person again, who's got the leverage in that conversation? Do I have the leverage? Does Brooke have the leverage? Where does the leverage lie?
Depends whose side you're looking at it from.
Okay,
He wants the money.
Look at it from Brooke's side, or look at it from my side. Do I have leverage? Do I have more leverage than Brooke?
Assuming Brooke actually cares about that person.
Yeah, let's assume that this is a close loved one. Brooke cares. So she's not gonna, this person's not expendable to Brooke. Who's got the leverage?
You.
I do.
You do.
What makes you say that?
You have something she wants.
I have something she wants. So if you carry that to its logical conclusion, if I've got the leverage, Brooke has none.
But she has what you want too. She has the money that you want. Without the money.
Okay, so what are you saying? She's got leverage?
You both have leverage over each other. It's just who can take advantage of that and recognize how to leverage that leverage.
All right, so I'm gonna make you go a little bit deeper than that. How, in God's name, does Brooke have leverage in this case?
Because if she doesn't want to pay, or she can't pay for whatever reason, then, well, your leverage kind of goes down, or what you're looking for from her side is gone.
You're in the ballpark. You're right there.
Well, you did this to get money, right? That's her leverage. She has money. You want money.
Exactly. So take it out of the realm of kidnapping, right? Let's say this is a business transaction, because that's what a kidnapping is. And imagine in your business, you had one customer on the planet. As a business, how much leverage would you have if you had one customer on the planet?
Next to none.
You wouldn't have any. And so from Brooke's perspective, go back to the kidnapping, there is one person on the planet that would pay $10 million for Brooke's relatives, and that's Brooke. There's nobody else. There are no other customers for Brooke's relative. And so going back to what we said earlier, it depends on what side of the table you are on. In that specific instance, Brooke has leverage because she's the only buyer for the product that the kidnapper is providing. Value. What you value is probably going to differ from what the counterpart values. You should always be looking for high value trades. That's the high value trade are the 2 words that we use to replace the word compromise. Compromise doesn't make a lot of sense. What do they value? What do you value? Price. Price will make you do stupid things. You hear the price you want, you go crazy. You love it. But price is only one term, but it's an emotional term, because if we hear the price we want, we think we've done our job. If we don't hear the price we want, we're worried about paying too much. We're worrying about what we're going to look like back at our company with our peers when they hear the price that was given. So price is very seductive, but I want to tell you that it's only a term. It's only one term. Carl Icahn would negotiate with people and companies and agreed to the most outrageous pricing because he knew that he was going to kill them on terms. That was his thing. Given to the pricing, they get so excited, and the terms were just freaking unwieldy and wound up putting more money back in his pocket. But because the price was what was after, was so seductive, they failed to see that. And so just be very careful when you hear the price that you want. A price is a yes, and a yes without a how is worthless. So when you hear the price that you want, you guys come to an agreement on price, your job is not done. Your job is not to get so excited that you actually shut down and start looking at the implementation process. Go back to that scenario we talked about earlier with the guy and the building in the historic part of town, and the price that he thought he was going to get that building for excited him so much that he failed to realize that he could have capitalized on other properties that were also for sale. And then fairness. We're going to talk about the fairness accusations audit next session. And I'm going to give you a list of accusations audits that are go-tos, but the fairness accusations audit is the one that you really cannot do without. You and I both know that when you talk about fair, fairness, unfair, unfairness, people use those concepts to manipulate you because of their emotional potency. If I were to tell Christopher at the beginning of the conversation, look, Chris, before we get into this conversation, I want you to know I only want what's fair. If you hear that from your counterpart prior to you jumping into the meat of the conversation, get ready, because at the first opportunity, they're going to try to slit your throat. People will throw that out because they know that it makes people uncomfortable when they are labeled as being unfair. So from that point on, if Chris and I are engaged in conversation and he doesn't agree with anything that I say, what specter is now hanging over him? That specter being unfair. When somebody labels you as being unfair, that is an attack on your character. It's an attack on your integrity. And attacks in both of those places make us uncomfortable. And the response is to relieve that discomfort by acquiescing to whatever the counterpart says, just so you can remove that label of unfairness from you. And what happens is you wind up capitulating where you shouldn't, compromising where you shouldn't, giving away things that you shouldn't, all in the name of being viewed as fair again. So to mitigate that, Christopher is going to say to me, before we even get started, listen, Derek, at any point during this conversation, you think I'm being unfair, I want you to stop me. And we're going to rewind that conversation back to where the unfairness began, and we'll pick it up from there. You're taking authority and permission away from me from using that against you in the course of the conversation going forward. The other big problem with tactical empathy, the execution, the demonstration of tactical empathy, is people think that if I show that I'm tactically empathetic, it's going to convey weakness on my part. It's going to convey that they have an opening for me to take advantage of. Because you see, in my mind, you're thinking tactical empathy and assertiveness are mutually exclusive to one another. You're either going to be tactically empathetic or you're going to be assertive. You can't be both. And the fact of the matter is, tactical empathy is the required precursor to your being assertive. Right before you're going to drop the bomb on them. Right before you're going to say it doesn't work for us. Nothing short or nothing more complicated than I'm sorry, I'm afraid. That's very generous. It's clear that you guys are trying to move in our direction. We just can't do that. This is your actual shortcut to being more assertive. Because at the end of the day, you've got a goal, you've got an objective in every difficult conversation. I want or I need is in your head. I want or I need is in the head of your counterpart. Which means at some point you're going to state that goal and objective. You're going to draw your line in the sand. You're going to make your ask, or you're going to state whatever your case in chief is. Prior to doing that, tactical empathy. It's always tactical empathy first. Your goal, your objective comes last. The best way for you to put your foot down is to soften it with being tactically empathetic. Instead of thinking in terms of compromise, which is a silly idea, think in terms of high value trades. What can you trade this person in order to keep the value levels satisfied on both sides? That doesn't have to do with cutting your price. What else is there? How can you convey that there's no more movement on price? High value trades.